Welcome back on the Good Morning Artesia radio show. Joining us from Santa Fe is State Representative Jim Townsend, the minority leader in the House for the Republicans. Jim, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning.
You bet. Thank you, Gene, for the opportunity.
Well, what a crazy time we live in. The legislature is in special session, working on redistricting. It's a process that happens every 10 years following the completion of a census. And redistricting every 10 years is always subject to political sways back and forth. It's not new. It happens in every state. People in Texas are complaining about what the Republicans are doing over there. So I wanted to have you on just to kind of get a lay of the land and see what's happening with what's coming from this special session in Santa Fe for New Mexico.
Well, thanks again, Gene. I think it's important for the listeners to know that, the legislature last session passed a citizens redistricting committee idea. The thought was, bipartisanly passed, that we would get a map drawn that was not subject to as much political gerrymandering, and that the people of New Mexico would have better representation, that communities of interest, geographic abnormalities, racial communities, pockets of people that were unique, much like the tribe, would have representation that was unique to them. And boy, all we did was took the lid off and dumped a bunch of stupid into the can. We had all these meetings, and in the end, what happened was, when the Citizens Redistricting Committee finished, they sent their maps to the legislature, i.e. Legislative Council and the majority leadership. They started having meetings, and we know now that about 21 changes were made to the Citizens Redistricting maps. Precincts were changed, district lines were redrawn, and then it was kind of shuttled back to the Citizens Redistricting Committee and say, put your rubber stamp on this and we'll. And, the real problem is with the maps that have been presented and passed is that I don't care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, and I really mean this, it does not make any difference. If you live outside of Santa Fe, Albuquerque, you are, and you're a conservative, you are at a real disadvantage. And I can prove that statistically, because if you go look at what happened in the tribal communities up in the Northwest area, the new law allowed deviation of plus or minus 10%. But when they allowed the tribal communities to be so overrepresented with such a small number of constituents, they allowed them to have a deviation of about 0.7%, which meant that outside of that tribal community, the largest definition you could have was +3. And in generic terms, what it means is that those people that represent their representatives in those tribal communities, their vote's worth about 10 to 15% more than yours or my vote is down in the south end of the state. On top of that, it is readily apparent, especially with the congressional maps, that their attack that has been voiced for the last couple of years on rural New Mexico, oil and gas, the agricultural community, is in full assault. We now, under the proposed maps, have a lady representing all of the Permian that hates oil and gas.
Right.
We have a lady that has strongly supported urban initiatives and thunder nose at rural initiatives, supporting rural New Mexico. And we have a lady that is a progressive Democrat that is supporting conservative values on both sides of the aisle. And I tell you, my phone has been lit up by Democrat and Republican friends in southeast New Mexico, mostly who are either oil and gas people, working the oil and gas deals, have ranches, or just have conservative values, like many of us on both sides of the aisle and of many races do. And they are livid. I mean, I was telling Rod Montoya this morning, I've got calls, people wanting to say, can we help if we come to Santa Fe? And I'm a little bit concerned that there are so many emotions flowing.
Right.
It's craziness. But, you know, I told you the little story early on. I mean, there were some funny rule changes that the speaker was proposing early on, and he has the votes to pass them. I can't stop him.
Right.
I can make it hard on him, but I can't stop him. So I went to him and I said, Mr. Speaker, can you tell me why these rules are being proposed like this? It's different. He said, well, I will. He said, we were concerned that you might act like the Texas Democrats and leave the state and go to Washington. And I said, well, first of all, Mr. Speaker, you got to remember, we were the ones that were in the House last year, and we stayed.
Right.
And the last place I'm going to run and hide is in Washington, D.C. So,
yeah.
But it's just crazy. It's like that.
It's amazing because it seems like, just observing from the outside, you're there, so you're trying to work with these folks, but it just seems like they project upon the Republicans things that they think about, or actions that they would take, or reactions that they would have to these things. I looked at the congressional map. I had no idea that the people up in Chaves County and northern Lee County had so much philosophically and mentally in comparison with the people out of Taos and that part of the state. And all I could think of is that we must have repressed liberalism, and we've been beaten down with all this oppressive Trumpism and conservatism that we have to let it go, Jim. We have to let it go and accept our northern brethren. I don't understand why they think that this will pass muster. It's interesting, though, that you are hearing from people on both sides of the aisle that are finally. Does it surprise you that people are finally waking up to what's been going on in Santa Fe in this process?
I don't think so. I think people don't want to get involved in this process. They hate politics for the most part. They don't like the partisan crap that goes on. They don't like the fact that we have been rated so poorly as a state for 100 years. And they just want to wash their hands of it. It's kind of nasty. And I had one of the doctors call me the other night and thank me for making the changes to HB 11, and said really what needed to be done was the thing needed to be repealed, and I agreed with her. And my response to her was, I thanked her for her kind words, and I said, this process is a nasty process. It's often corrupt, but sometimes the best thing we can do is kick our discovered ignorance down the road. And that's exactly what we did. I mean, we fought that dang bill last year. We said it's going to tear up doctors and hospitals. We have a hard time attracting people. It's going to make it worse. And sure enough, it happened. They forced it through, in the dark, early morning hours one night. And sure enough, here comes the doctor screaming and hollering and saying, this doesn't work. I can't afford this. I can't even get an insurance policy. And so we kicked that can down the road until January 1 of 24. So at least we got a couple of years to try to straighten up the mess.
Well, and you've heard it from the red flag laws. You've heard it from the camera, the body cam
Yep.
laws. All these things happen. There's this rush to get this thing done, and then when we start seeing what the problems are, even with the marijuana legislation, there are issues that have to be dealt with before that really should move forward, and it's not getting done. What was House Bill 11, by the way, for those?
House Bill 11 was a bill that was an amended proclamation bill, which has a really neat story about it that most people don't understand. That the governor introduced night before last, and normally a proclamation is a constitutional authority of the governor to, in special sessions, to declare what is germane. And normally she'll say, like healthcare or taxes or energy. I mean, it's broad and defined. What the governor did this time was, in her amended proclamation, she specifically identified the word changes, the grammatical changes that she would allow in the bill. So she was legislating from the fourth floor. And that's so disrespectful. I mean, if she was so dang smart, she wouldn't have got her butt beat in the Supreme Court, because we all tried to tell her, you are not the person that should be appropriating $1 billion. I was in her office. Greg Baca was in her office. Rod Montoya was in her office. I mean, we sat there and, read it to her, said, let's work together. Let's call a special session. Let's get this done. And oh no, I'm the boss. And so finally,
she knows Joe Biden personally.
Yeah. I wish she knew him better.
Oh, so that's another one of the frustrating aspects of it. We're coming up on the news break here. Jim, can you stick around for a few minutes on the other side of the news? Because I think what we need to talk about is where this redistricting process is, and see if there's ways that we can help to move this forward to straighten it out. So stick around with us. State Representative Jim Townsend is with, and we're going to ask him to hold through the news, and we'll be back.